It is a singular focus of our department to reduce irregular migration in the hemisphere and unlawful entry out.
Okay, well, thank you for that, but you're doing a horrible job, and the American people know it, okay? I mean, you guys are doing the worst job in the history of this country. So the fact that you even answered that as if that's your responsibility just shows me tells me how detached from reality you absolutely are. I want to start with you, Mr. Hunter. You made some statements today talking about the causation of this crisis that we see at our southern border. You cited poverty, corruption, climate change, to name a few. Is that correct? I want to run by some actual quotes from President Biden for you real quick. On September 12th, 2019, then candidate Biden said, "We're a nation who says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come." Did you hear that? Did you hear him say that, sir? Yes or no?
I didn't specifically hear that quote.
Okay, thank you. On June 27th, 2019, candidate Biden, "Those who come seeking asylum, we should immediately have the capacity to absorb them, keep them safe." Did you hear him say that?
I don't specifically recall that quote, sir.
Okay. Would you agree with those statements, though, that we should absorb them? That we should have the capacity to absorb them? We should do that?
Congressman, we're required under law to inspect individuals who present, and individuals do have the right to seek asylum in the United States.
So would you add that to your list now that we've gone over that it wasn't just it's not poverty, corruption, climate change, a tsunami, like my friend here, Mr. Burkeen, was talking about? Do you think that one of two people that could have been the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, saying that to the entire country and to the entire world during a television hearing, do you think that had anything to do with what we're seeing now at the southern border?
Congressman, it sounds like it is a recognition that there are people who are fleeing persecution, and in my reference to the particular governments, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, there are individuals who are fleeing persecution under those regimes.
Okay, so one of the leaders of the free world said, "Hey, if you want to come here, you should come," right? So, all right, that's really what's going on here. That's what my friend, Mr. Burkeen, was talking about. That's what many people are talking about up here. This isn't the, global climate, movement that many of my colleagues on the other side are trying to make it out to be. A lot of what it is globalism, sir. There are a lot of people around the world that are very, very powerful, and they don't want anybody to have borders. They want globalism. World Economic Forum is one of them, and that's unfortunately, what many of our leaders actually take their cue from. What do you guys have to say to Americans who are living in fear every day of another terrorist attack? Let's start with you, Ms. Sabatino.
No, thank you for the question. We invest significant resources, starting with our National Targeting Center, which also plays a significant role in the screening and vetting of individuals, whether they're through these processes or any individuals arriving to the U.S.
What do you guys have to say to Americans who have seen their schools, hospitals, and community spaces overtaken by migrants? You guys have any? You get a chance. You're on TV right now. Do you guys have anything to say to them? Do you have anything to say to Americans who are afraid that cartels are taking over their towns? How about anything to say to Americans who have lost their children to fentanyl? Do you guys have anything to say to them? Go ahead, Mr. Hunter.
Congressman, in regards to the irregular migration challenges, it is a singular focus of our department to reduce irregular migration in the hemisphere and unlawful entry out.
Okay, well, thank you for that, but you're doing a horrible job, and the American people know it, okay? I mean, you guys are doing the worst job in the history of this country. So the fact that you even answered that as if that's your responsibility just shows me tells me how detached from reality you absolutely are. Mr. Hunter, where were you on 9/11, sir? Do you remember where you were?
I do indeed, Congressman. I was working in Washington, D.C. At an NGO on DuPont Circle at the time.
What about you, Ms. Sabatino? Where were you?
I was an immigration inspector at John F. Kennedy International Airport.
You remember exactly where you were that day?
I do.
Ma'am, what about you? You remember?
Yeah, I worked for the Executive Office for U.S. Attorney's Department of Justice.
Miss Youth?
I was serving in Madrid at the time, but I was in Geneva at a training.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked you guys that, do you remember what Americans were saying right after that? Do you remember what Americans were saying? Do you remember saying never again? We're never going to let this happen again? You guys remember that? Yes or no? Go ahead, Miss Youth. Do you remember Americans saying that?
Yes, sir.
Miss Meckley?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Sabatino?
Yes.
Well, guess what, guys? It's going to happen again. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And for every one of you guys that has sat by and supported these policies and these tools that we're talking about today that have allowed and expedited this mass migration into the United States, you're going to share a little bit of that ownership, all right? That changed so many of our lives forever. We said never again, and here we are implementing policies and tools that are making it so easy for individuals who don't love this country, who want to do harm to this country. And we're not talking about everybody. We know there are plenty of people who just want to come here for a better life. But you guys all know there are plenty of people in this country right now that want to do Americans harm. And this is my question for you, and we don't have time to answer it, but I want you to think about this. When the next major attack, like 9/11 or a series of 9/11s happen in this country, will you still continue to support these policies and these tools? Because we're not going to forget it. We're not going to forget who was at the helm. We're not going to forget who was in these positions. We're not going to forget the policies. We're not going to forget the tools. And we're not going to forget the committee hearings like we had today, where you guys could have condoned this administration and you guys didn't. All right? Thank you. I yield back.